That's good. Okay, so who am I? I'm Mike Hughes. I actually work for a consultancy similar to Mantel Group that we're sitting in right now. What does Mantel do for a living? They build backends, they build AI, they build cloud, they build everything, they build mobile. I work for a company called Deus, and we do the same thing, but this is a community group, so we're here in a personal capacity, not a professional capacity. But there are others here as well that actually build mobile apps for a living. So we have to get paid based on mobile apps. One of those people is Andreas, who's out the back, sipping on water right now. So we do this for a living. So we're really focused on doing things like building apps really fast, building apps really cheaply, building apps with less bugs, building apps for both iOS and Android constantly. So that's why we're doing this talk tonight, because Flutter is a big part of making sure that we can deliver effectively native apps for clients in a fast and efficient way with a single code base. So I haven't talked at one of these things for a long time. I used to talk at these quite a lot, but it's been a while, so just bear with me. And what I will ask is if you've got any questions as we go along, rather than this being a mic talk fest, just stick your hand up and I'll answer the question straight away. So please ask as we go. So I'm going to talk today. I'm going to jump straight into the demo and cover the general stuff at the end. And we're not going to go super deep. So this talk's not going to be all the bells and whistles and all the nooks and crannies of Flutter Flow, because you can go onto YouTube and watch a million videos, and Flutter Flow themselves actually produce a lot of videos on how to use Flutter Flow in extreme detail. So we're more going to talk about, okay, how do we use Flutter Flow in a professional or an amateur dev experience? So you've got to ask the question, if you're a dev, if you're a Flutter dev, why would you bother with Flutter Flow? Isn't it a low-code, no-code solution tool? Why would you want to use Flutter Flow if you can code in Flutter? And that's the question that I will try to answer as part of doing this talk. See how we go. But just quickly, just so I know the audience, because I'm going to change the talk a bit depending on who's here. Who would say they're an experienced software developer? And you need to put your hand up, yeah. So who's a proper, so you do software development for a living, pretty much. Okay, so that's a good mix. Who's kind of learning to code-ish? A little bit, one, two, Susie? Sort of, maybe. So there's a couple of people maybe learning to code. Okay, that's cool. Anyone who's a UX UI designer only here? No? I probably wouldn't expect any, but no, none. Okay, who's even heard of Flutter Flow? About half the room, okay? So some of you have heard of it. Who's actually done even light use of Flutter Flow? One? Yep. Susie, a little bit, half. What was that, a halfer? Yep, a little bit. Anyone done heavy use of Flutter Flow?
Just you.
Just me. Okay, and by the way, this is a work in progress, so I'm still getting my head around Flutter Flow, but so I wouldn't say I'm a heavy user, but I'm almost becoming a convert, but I'm kind of keeping an open mind as well. So why are we having this talk specifically? At Deus and at every consultancy that I've ever worked for, we've always looked at low-code, no-code tools, because we're always interested, is there any new tool that can deliver on the promise of like going bang, dropping some UI around, hit a button and bingo, you get an app? Is anyone got close to that? And the short answer is hell no. No one's even got close. So, but at the moment, there's a whole raft of new low-code, no-code solutions. And if you go on YouTube and you put in low-code, no-code, oh my God, you'll get the kitchen sink of how to make $1 million with an app. You'll get low-code and no-code is terrible, don't touch it. You'll get the whole gamut, the whole spectrum of opinions on low-code and no-code. And there's a whole raft of new ones. These are just some of the most popular ones at the moment. Flutter Flow is probably pretty strong in this space at the moment, but there's this whole new wave. And I think I stopped playing with them because there were so many coming out. It's a bit like JavaScript frameworks, right? There's one every 2 days. Jesus Christ. So it's thick and fast with low-code tools, but none of them have really gotten close to being used by me as a Flutter dev, or us considering it in something like a DS consultancy to help us build apps until Flutter Flow. And I'll explain why as we go through this talk, and hopefully I'll convince you that maybe there's a role for it in your dev workflow. But in short as well, a dev's going to lose their jobs. Again, hell no. Software engineering's not dead. And in some ways, all these new low-code, no-code solutions are just solidifying the fact that we still need software engineering. One of the things you'll find if you go into YouTube and watch a lot of opinion videos about Flutter Flow, about Aldo, Bravo, Thunkable, whatever, you'll typically get two polarizing opinions. One is they're great, but they're like a gateway drug. You get hooked, you can do a lot of the easy stuff, but when you want to actually get to the end and actually deliver an app and get it out without bugs and be fully functional, it always seems to fall short. So low-code tools are, if anything, an advertisement for good software engineering. The other thing too is that this is Flutter Melbourne. We're a group that focuses on Flutter and Flutter development. So how can we not, I don't think we've done a talk ever on Flutter Flow at all. And it's been around for about 3 years. So it's kind of the elephant in the room. How can we have not talked about Flutter Flow? Because Google supports it. It got started by a couple of ex-Google engineers, and it just focuses on Flutter. And it does a few things a little bit differently. So how can we ignore it? The short answer is we can't. And as I said before, continuous improvement is really important at any consultancy, be it Mantel, be it DS. We're always looking at places, at ways to do apps quicker and faster. I was on a call today where what did the client say? We don't have the budget for it. In other words, I want to do it cheaper. 6 weeks, too slow. I want to do it faster. So that constantly comes through in every single client. So we need to be looking at these sorts of tools as well, just to try and help us get there. So I'm going to do a quick demo experience of Flutter Flow, but as I said, I'm not going to go into the nooks and crannies of it because otherwise we'll be here until next Sunday. And there's a lot to talk about in terms of the demo. We'll get to it in a second. One thing that I got told quite late in the piece is I'm not allowed to show any current client apps that we're using and tinkering around with Flutter Flow. So that was a bit of a downside. So I'm going to be using a demo of an app I've previously done in Flutter. But I'm not going to go too deep, and I haven't quite had enough time to get it all into Flutter Flow, so you'll see it sort of very early days. One of the things I needed to answer was, can I use Flutter Flow to create something more than a simple app UI? So a lot of low-code, no-code tools, what they do is they give you a bag of tools, and you've got to make your app with those tools and those widgets, and so it ends up looking like those tools and those widgets. So you don't get into real detailed custom design, and you can't change everything. So the question is, can you do something beyond a simple app in a low-code tool? That was a key question. As a Flutter developer, it's got to help me enough. At DS, we play around with a lot of low-code tools, no-code tools, but in the end, we have to rework the code so much that it's not worth the effort. So any benefit in terms of time savings and effort needs to be significant, otherwise not worth it. And that applies to any of you guys too if you're doing your own projects. So this Flutter IO 2018 is actually an app that I've built before in Flutter, which was actually the Google I/O app in 2018 on Android and iOS. So I basically cloned it in Flutter from scratch, from the bottom up, full function. So I've built this app before, hand rolled it myself in Flutter, built the whole thing. So I know the app well, I know the UI well, I know the problems in implementing the app in Flutter, I know all those things. So that's why I chose this particular app to do as a demo, and we'll look at it in a sec. So that bullet point there is just, I want to build an app, something like Flutter IO 2018, that has its own unique look. It's a custom app. That's what I want to build. I don't want to build something with a no-code, low-code tool that says it needs to look like this particular thing. So I want a totally custom app. I've just mentioned that. And yeah, just that last bullet. This is a work in progress because at the last minute I got told I couldn't show any client apps. So forgive me if it's not fully functional just yet. So the demo will be light. But this is effectively the Google I/O 2018 app. It's also the version they wrote in Flutter called Flutter I/O 2018. It's reasonably complicated for an app. So that's the other thing with low-code, no-code tools. Your experience may vary, which is completely dependent on how complicated your app is. So for example, this one is sort of a mid-complexity app. So those of you that are Flutter devs will recognize, we've got app bars at the top here, info schedule map. We've got, tabs here across the bottom, all the contents in a scrollable, single scrollable view. Got a bottom app bar, and we've got, the Android nav bars down the bottom that are stylized and colored. And we've got a custom Google Maps over here with some custom markers and stuff like that. But it's a mid-complexity app, I'd characterize it at. So there's some stuff in here that no low-code, no-code tool will have this sort of look in its standard suite of UI. So demo time. Okay, let me just get to the right things. By the way, I've got the Pro license for Flutter Flow, and we'll talk about licensing in the end, because that's kind of important. Okay, this is just to give you, because there's no one here that's done heavy Flutter Flow, those of you who have done light will have seen this before and you'll kind of know this experience, but for everyone else I wanted to make sure that you got some idea of what it's like to use Flutter Flow. Long story short, it's almost like a great visual representation of Flutter. So you've got pages here, you just add in pages, a page is a page. That's fine. You will probably all recognize this widget tree down the side. This is just a representation of the widgets on the page, very much like the widget tree that's inherently in Flutter. This is your main view over here. On the right this is where all the properties are. So if you've got this tab here so we've got this tab bar here. Think of this bar down the right of all the properties on every widget in Flutter. So for a tab bar, some of you even may recognize the property names here. So you've got padding, you've got alignment, you've got some label properties for testing, you've got some style, you've got font size, secondary font family, font size, etc., etc., etc. But some of you eagle-eyed people will notice that for a tab bar, this is not all the properties that are available on tab bar. So if you look at tab bar, no, we've got all these properties and we've got all these methods, right? Great, okay, awesome. They're not all here. So one thing to remember with Flutter Flow, it doesn't cover every widget. Oh, I better show you that. So on the left here, under this menu option, you've got all the commonly used widgets. You've got text, column, row, container, image, button, all the things just grouped in a sort of slightly more logical way. So you'll notice that that's not the complete list of widgets in Flutter either. It's a very small subset. Max, do you know off the top of your head how many total widgets there are in Flutter, or does anyone know?
Shamefully do not.
Last time I looked, I think it was urging on 300 plus.
Sounds about right.
Last time I looked at it, so that's not 300 plus, right? So not every widget is there, and for every widget, not all the properties are there. So you have to keep in mind that Flutter Flow won't let you do everything that you can do in Flutter. Like all low-code, no-code tools, ultimately, you get to the restrictions of your low-code, no-code tool. Where do you go to make it better? If the low-code, no-code tool lets you export or grab the code, you have to then go down to code to do the more elaborate things. And that's just a reality of the no-code, low-code sort of tooling environment. And Flutter Flow is no exception. No questions yet? Cool. There's a whole bunch of things that in Flutter Flow, I keep saying low-code, no-code tool. I shouldn't say that, because if you look at Flutter Flow website, they very much pitch it as, I think they call it a visual editor or a visual coding experience. It is very much like that for Flutter. So it's actually not meant for people who can't code, to be honest. It's more for devs. It's more of a, how do I get started on my code base? How do I start from zero code? Maybe I can use Flutter Flow to put the major screens together, major elements, and export the code, and then go from there. That's really what it's designed for. And those of you who are, seasoned developers will know that, you can, like this button here, this is doing a debug build in the cloud of your code. So as you construct the UI, it's basically generating the code in the background. It's generating a complete Flutter project. So all the files, everything. And then you do something like this and it's doing a debug build of that Flutter code in the cloud and representing it as a web view. See how long this takes. If not, I'll kill it. Any questions so far?
Is it open source?
No, Flutter Flow is not open source. It's a private company. And it started by two founders from Google who wanted to make coding more approachable and digestible for the average person. But I saw a video this morning actually. They hate the term no code and low code, and they hate the fact that Flutter Flow's in this bucket of low code, no code tools. So it's to answer your question, no, it's not open source. So you have to buy a license for the product and use it. So that's the downside. So it's a tool to construct and generate code. It's not a framework you can add into your project or anything like that. It's actually a platform and a tool to help build code.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
So this is, for example, this is actually, see, debug tag right there. So it's actually a debug build. You can actually do a release build as well, but I won't go into that. And the experience of doing Flutter Flow is basically, yep, I'm gonna, hold on, what's going on? Let's just refresh that page. Basically, the experience is you drag and drop widgets onto a page to construct your screens, and most of this has been useful in our realm too for doing UI code. So we'll talk about integrations in a sec, but the most useful thing is to use it for UI code generation, because you've got this visual editor where you can edit and create your basic rough screens in Flutter Flow, export the code, and then code on the project as normal from there. So it's great that it's Flutter specific and it's not one of these tools that tries to do React Native, TypeScript and Flutter. Sorry, question?
It's a complicated Flutter Flow project. Is the exported code easy to read for the developers, or is it like complicated?
Yes and no. We'll do an export in a second, and you'll see the code and what's generated, because that's one of the key questions. So I won't go into this too much anymore, but this is basically the experience. Drag the widgets from over here, drop them over here, move them around over here, set their properties over there, run it and debug it, see if there's some problems with it, and then you kind of go from there. Max?
Is there any facility to do event handling? So set on click or whatever?
Yeah, there's built-in business logic that there's a logic tree, so I might just go down some of these features on the left just to give you a bit of a quick tour of what's going on. This is the main widget viewer. You've got pages here and shows the widget tree here. There's a storyboard feature here, and unfortunately this app isn't very deep at the moment with many screens, so it doesn't look that impressive. But it basically gives you a lovely storyboard view with all the navigation paths in the app, which is really handy. So this is really kind of quite nice. It just so happens that with the bottom app bar, all you see here at the moment is, the three screens, which is each of the three bottom bar nav items. Just to get into other stuff, because it is supported by Google and it was 2x Googlers, it allows you to connect to various backend data sources. So Firestore is a key one. So you can set up Firebase integration in it as well. So you can just set up your Firebase project, add the details in here, and basically link your project in as well. You can muck around with the data schema, which I won't go into here, and I haven't done it for this project, but it gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So despite it appearing like a basic tool, you can go really deep on Flutter Flow. You'll be surprised how far you can get. You can build the UI of an app, link it up to, say, Firestore, Google Analytics, the integrations we'll get to in a sec, a whole bunch of things and generate the code. So you don't just get the UI, you can, if you want to, you can get to quite a mature initial version of your app. So it's pretty good. I have to say I was somewhat impressed when I actually started playing around with it. I thought it was going to be a lot simpler. You can put in a whole bunch of app state, in which you can do control logic on max. So app state, some good coding practices like constants are chucked in. You can bring in your API calls. So if you've got custom API calls, you just define them here, add your tokens in here, and make those calls from your code. You can add project assets here. So if I have an existing project and I didn't dump them in here, but I almost this morning grabbed all my assets folder from my, so where is it? So if you go to this app, so here's my Flutter.io 2018 app in Flutter that I hand wrote. I could easily grab the assets folder here, and there's lots of assets like Lottie animations, JSON files, fonts, icons, etc. I could just grab those and dump them into that folder in Flutter Flow, and then start using them in Flutter Flow. So it's quite good for if you've got the assets already. You can do custom code. So, and this was started from a blank template, so I don't have any custom code in here, but you'll see that you can add custom functions, you can do your own custom widgets, but just quickly, any of these selectors, when you go into them, they actually show you the Flutter code. So this is the Flutter code that was generated and that Flutter Flow is holding internally itself. So this is a very basic main.dart, obviously, but you can go in and make changes to these, and this is where you make there's some initial actions and stuff in here that I haven't gone into in this project, Max. But you can go to town in here and write a whole bunch of custom code if there's stuff in Flutter Flow that won't do what you want it to do. Cloud functions, so Firebase Cloud Functions gets integrated here too, so that was a bit of a surprise. Automated tests, these are integration tests, so these are Flutter integration tests that you can define. Haven't got into this at all, not even in this project, not in a new project yet. And of course you've got colors, typography, you can even link it into a design system, which our designers think is fantastic. And you can set up your theme widgets as well. So the depth of functionality in here is, I've only just scratched the surface. So has anyone gone really deep on Flutter? Has anyone gone, on Flutter Flow? How deep have you gone, I guess is the question. Yep. Okay. Speaking of custom code, we should touch on that for a second. So for example, is a good example. So for example, click, wrong page. Thank you. Schedule. So this page. Come on. Where's the damn? I'll pick this icon, it's not quite right, but so this icon here, that's the wrong icon. So the icon it's actually not the wrong icon, but I'm picking a different icon. So if there's an icon that I don't have, for example, this is just an example. Flutter Flow looks at the material icons library. It's got Font Awesome in here as well, but I couldn't find the right icon. So this is where you can actually import your own icon. So you can import a custom icon, do all that sort of stuff. There's limitations though all throughout Flutter Flow. So there's things that you'll just go to do in Flutter that you won't be able to do in Flutter Flow. You just have to kind of get used to that. But in a lot of cases, it gives you functionality like this to add the proper icon. It just so happens that this app has a whole bunch of custom icons that aren't in Material Icon Library or Font Awesome. Does everyone kind of get the gist? Because this is it. This is as simple as it gets. There's just a UI screen, a big sort of drag and drop area in the middle, widgets on the left, properties on the right. This is kind of the crux of the whole thing. Did anyone have any other questions about this sort of stuff? Because it's this simple. Nope. Okay, let me just jump back to slides. Okay, so that's great. We've got this tool that gives us a visual editor for Flutter, which is great. We can drag and drop widgets and do all this stuff and construct our app. But how do you use it in your normal dev workflow? So this is where GitHub integration comes in. So what I'm going to do is this project happens to be GitHub integrated. So, and here's a list, for example, of some of the other integrations. Firebase authentication, push notifications, Stripe, Braintree, Supabase is even in here, SQLite, Algola, Analytics, Google Maps, yada, 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 and the list goes on. Gemini, one signal. But GitHub integration, so I've actually linked this up to this particular repo, which is a personal public repo. And so let's just do a push. So I added that image. So all you do is integrate it to your repo. So you're busily generating Flutter Flow screens and making them look pretty good, getting them roughly right. And then once you have the right license, you can integrate with the GitHub repo and then push this code. And I'm, in this case, using it mostly for UI code. I'll just push this to my repo and it'll get there in a second. So the normal developer workflow, one of the things we're kicking around on with a project on the moment, we've got a project for a client. Bingo, success, we'll go have a look at that in a sec. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is we've got a designer doing screens in Figma and pulling them into Flutter Flow, going, yep, I want to make Flutter Flow look like my designs in Figma. She's then going to do a push of that UI code into the repo, whilst at the same time we've got another dev doing some deep and dark web view integration on purely in terms of normal Flutter coding. So we've got two people coming into one repo. One's coming in on Flutter Flow, the other's doing standard normal Flutter development. So if we go over to that, as well, let's just do a pull request. New pull request.
Quick question, Mike.
Go
How
for
does
it.
that work? Like, is there a way you need to tell Flutter Flow to pull after the developers push some custom code into the repo, or it just ignores what that code is in the repo, as long as he doesn't touch what Flutter Flow created?
Yeah, you still have to. There is a branching strategy that they recommend, which is here. So everything comes through on a Flutter Flow branch. So it comes through on the Flutter Flow branch. They recommend that you've then got a development branch that you merge that Flutter Flow code into, as well as, I guess, other things into the development branch. And then you just go to main branch and everyone deploys off main. Well, not everyone, but that's kind of the... I know, this development branch, Andreas is shaking his head. Are you shaking your head on this?
It just looks like git flow, which is an anti-button.
A whole nother talk, okay. We'll come back to that. But basically, it basically just comes in on a branch. So that gives us a lot of flexibility to just go, you know what, okay, let me grab the Flutter Flow. Let me grab the Flutter Flow code that's coming in. Now, what changed? Yep, so that's just, what did I change? Oh, okay. Not sure when I changed that.
Image.
Yep, single scroll view. Yep, it's the image. Pick some photos. Yep, that's it. So, okay, create the pull request.
Speed not cost.
We'll have a look at the code in a sec. Ugh. So we're pretending this is that project that I just talked about. Right project? No. So we've merged Flutter Flow code into the repo. I'm pulling it down. That's all cool. Now if I start Device Manager, just bear with me. I want start a new phone. Come on. and we'll just wait for this to do a debug build and run. But in a sec, let's go have a look at the code that actually generated and see what Dart Analyzer thinks it's see how good it thinks it is. FYI, the first time I did this, this was the first low-code, no-code tool I've ever used where I've done it in the low-code, no-code tool, grabbed the code in some way, shape or form, run it, and had it run successfully without problems first time on iOS and Android. So that was a good start in my mind. So, and bingo, there's the image and bingo, there's the what we've got of the actual, oh, thank you. That map I haven't finished with. But basically, that's it. So this is kind of the developer workflow that you probably want to use for Flutter Flow. Get it roughly right, do a rough version of your app, do as much or as little in Flutter Flow as you want, bring the code bingo straight down into your repo, then clean up the code from there. That's kind of the pitch, or that's the idea around doing this sort of thing and making good use of Flutter Flow. Shoot.
It doesn't go back, does it? You can't then import the code you wrote back into
That is a really good question. Yes and no. There's some sort of interplay between the custom code that you put in the Flutter Flow interface, which goes straight into Flutter Flow, and there is a way to get your code. So if you put other updated code in the repo, how do you get it back up into Flutter Flow? That's something I'm still looking at because I'm not completely clear on whether that's possible for a few reasons, but we'll come around to the end. So I think there is a way to do it, but I just haven't quite nailed it yet at the moment. By the way, there is a Mac OS client here too, so there is a native client if you want to do it locally rather than the web view. Same deal. This does allow you some extra functionality too, so you can do a local run, which I haven't set up for this project. So you can actually, I'm not exactly clear on how much extra functionality you get from the Mac client, but there is some. But I'm not sure that it's got any real advantage at the moment. Okay. So, developer questions. Okay, what's a Flutter Flow project? You can go into the console, you can look at the code, you can see there's Flutter code there, you can see the UI, but what's actually in a project? They're pretty transparent around this, right? So one of my key questions was, okay, Flutter Flow is making this Flutter project, it's building and generating code. What code's it using? And right here in their doco, they go through and tell you what packages they're using. So auto-size text, this is all standard packages that are probably in every single one of your Flutter projects, right? Cache network image, Flutter animate, Go router. Who uses Go router for their routing? Everyone? Nobody? Don't you?
Auto route.
Use auto route, okay. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag. But they're pretty transparent with what packages are used. And if you're interested to know about versions, they're not the most recent. So this is a pubspec.yaml with all those packages in it. They're not the most recent. So if I do a pub upgrade, it's going to update a whole bunch of packages to the latest. So I wouldn't say it's got the latest of every package. We looked at the Flutter Flow branch. Oh, Data Analyzer. What does Data Analyzer think? Not great. Not great. So this is something that, this is a fairly small skeleton at the moment type project. It's got all those packages in it, but the code they generate, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't be happy with this many, even though they're info, there's no warnings or errors, but they're still info, it ain't great. Particularly given like, some of them are like, don't use printer production code, really? Invalid use of public type, oh geez, where's the camel case one? Yeah, constant string isn't a lowercase camel, they haven't even got camel case right. So this was a bit disappointing, I have to admit. So I wouldn't expect generated code to have all these sort of info warnings. I'd expect them to do better than this. They do mention this in their roadmap though for 2024. So if you go look up the Flutter Flow roadmap, one of the key things sort of in the middle of the list is higher quality coding standards, which is this. It's this. You should not get this. But this is still far and away better than any low-code, no-code solution I've actually used ever. That's that. Oh, custom code branching. So your question about this one. Custom code. Where is it? No, I think I've lost it. I'll have to come back to it. One of the other things that they say too on the website is one-click deployments. Definitely not. One-click, everyone sets up CI/CD pipelines in GitHub Actions or CodeMagic or whatever tool you're using. Once you've set all that up and you've got your Apple App Store and you've got your Google Play Store, yeah, then it's one click. That's what they're talking about, one click. So if you look at the instructions for how to actually do, where is it? Apple App Store deployment, and there's one for Google as well. Look at this. This is all the normal manual instructions you do for setting up an Apple account. So, generating an API account. Mind you, they've cut it down to the barest minimum in this document, but this is all the standard stuff you do manually. And then once you've done all that, yes, you can go into the console and push the button. That's the one-click button.
I had a vague memory that they automatically set up a CodeMagic project to do the CI in the background. Do they still do that?
Yeah, so just looking at that, this video, you'll notice here it's got CodeMagic here. This is an old video though. If you go into this screen right now into in this part of Flutter Flow, it doesn't mention CodeMagic. So they either don't use CodeMagic anymore to do that CI/CD pipeline push from the Flutter Flow console, or they're doing it themselves now under the hood with App Store Connect APIs and Google APIs, or they've just not mentioned CodeMagic because they don't want to mention CodeMagic. I don't know. So it's not exactly clear how they're doing some basic CI/CD before they push it to the store. But it's definitely not. You read on the website one-click deployments and you think, oh, one-click deployments, and then I start thinking, hold on, how are they setting up the Apple accounts and the Google accounts? And lo and behold, they're not. You still have to do all that, and then you get to a one-click, but that's nothing new. That's stuff we do on every project right now. So just, last slide. So Flutter Flow maturity. Yeah, as I mentioned before, 2 former Google engineers who wanted to make it easier for designer developers and entrepreneurs to build mobile apps. I think they've definitely got something with Flutter Flow, but it's much more for devs that want to do initial versions or builds of their app really easily in a GUI interface, but still do normal development after that. So they've kind of partially achieved their goal. It's actually been around for now over 3 years, which is a bit surprising. It was actually launched at Google I/O in 2021, and I think it's been featured at every single Google I/O since. And I won't go through the website and the blog and the pricing. You can have a look at that. Actually, I will go at pricing for one thing. Code export. So you can use Flutter Flow for free, but to get export code to your PC or integrate with GitHub, you're going to need the Pro license. So where's the GitHub? So GitHub integration here. It's only in the Pro license for $70 US a month. So that's not cheap. But the way we're kind of approaching it is use the free license to build your UI in the Flutter Flow GUI. Get Flutter Flow for a month for $70, export your code, do all your code exports into your GitHub repo, then fall back down to the free tier again. So that's how we're kind of getting around that. And yeah, you can have a look. There's a whole bunch of team plans and stuff like that, but that's the main thing. You either need Standard or Pro. Standard allows you to download the code without GitHub integration, but Pro gives you download of code and GitHub integration. But again, you only need to do it for the couple of months you're actually doing that, so you don't need it all the time. There's things like they're now running Flutter Flow developer conferences, which is a one-day event once a year, so it's a good sign. But this second last bullet what if Flutter Flow went away? Like all the other low-code, no-code tools seem to be the latest thing and then they seem to fade away. What happens if Flutter Flow went away? No big deal. You can export your code. So if Flutter Flow went away in a month, as long as you've exported your code, you're all good. So there's really no risk if Flutter Flow disappeared. I'll quickly show you this video. I won't actually play the video, but I'll show you this video. Flutter Flow and the Flutter Flow team hate the fact that they're kind of lumped in with all the low-code, no-code other tools. If you want, I'll give you this link afterwards, or I'll post it with Max. There's quite a long video here that goes into why they're not low-code, no-code, and they very much talk about, no, this is really a visual development environment for developers. It's not really for people who have no coding skills whatsoever. So this is a bit of a pushback video on all the bad press lately on low-code and no-code. So that's worth watching. I think it's about 10 minutes long. But that's quite a good response on that. So discussion, Q&A. What does everyone think?
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for your talk.
Cool. Thanks.